It's delightful to be here, and thank you to everyone who has joined the webinar today. This is Ann Melanson speaking from Bloom Nonprofit Consulting Group. A quick shout out to you all from my business partner and our Chief Moves Management Strategist, Carolyn Marshall. Say hello, Carolyn.
Hello, welcome everybody.
We have prepared quite a bit of information for you today in the hopes that we can help you identify strong major gift prospects and help you prepare for successful major gift requests. Just so that you know what our objectives for learning outcomes are today, I will just take a second to do a quick recap. Today we will provide you with some information and some context on the role and the value of peer-to-peer fundraising methods when making your major gift requests. We'll talk to you about the value and how to make a major gift request using face-to-face solicitation techniques. We'll talk a little bit about some of the other specific tools and techniques that are important for you to have in your arsenal as you prepare to make a major gift call. And throughout the course of our presentation today, we'll try to share some real-life examples with you, good, bad, and otherwise, based on our own experience. I will be incorporating those into our discussion today when I make reference to things like for instance and for example. It will be drawing upon the direct experience that Carolyn and I have had over the years and those of the clients and the other organizations that we have worked with. Through the course of the discussion today, I plan to pause at one juncture in the middle of our presentation to give you an opportunity to ask questions through the question box. And Marina and her colleague Jen will be moderating those questions and feeding them through. But don't be concerned, because at the end of the presentation we will be allowing about 10 minutes time wide open for you to ask any questions that you might have about the material that we cover today. So first off, we've been asked to provide a little bit of an introduction to ourselves. I'm Ann Melanson on the left, looking very stern in that particular photograph, which may or may not be part of my personality. On the right of your screen, you'll see my colleague Carolyn, whose very sunny disposition is shining through in that photograph. Carolyn and I are career fundraising professionals. We've both been working directly in the major gift and capital campaign arenas for collectively between the two of us about 42 years. So in my instance, I've spent perhaps half of my 27 years in the profession working in the role of directing major gift programs and capital campaigns within organizations and fundraising institutions, and the other half of my 27 years closer to working on behalf of organizations in a professional consulting capacity. Carolyn is a 15-year career professional, and her particular area of expertise is major gift identification, research, and moves management strategies. Our firm is about 6 years old, and we work with organizations that are in all stages and aspects of their major gift and campaign programs, primarily here in Canada, but also internationally. And that's as much as you probably need to know about us. An outline for you quickly of what we would like to cover today in this webinar. First off, we want to talk to you a little bit about what the characteristics are of a major gift. Some of you on the line are involved in major gift programs currently, and some may be just contemplating moving your fundraising program into an expanded major gift arena. And so we want to highlight a few of the key characteristics that you need to know as you move forward with that. We would like to talk with you a bit about what the characteristics of a major donor prospect are. Many of you will be familiar with the language of prospect. Some of you may not, but a prospect is really a code word that we use in the profession for a potential major donor. I would like to point out to you that major gifts, I want to point out at this stage, that major gifts really are made by an array of different types of donors. So you'll find major gifts made by individuals, some by large corporations or small companies, local businesses, granting foundations, and sometimes even community service organizations in your community. And therefore, the prospects that we discuss can be any of those types of entities. They can be people, they can be businesses or foundations, or other organizations. And each of those types of major donor prospect really does have a bit of a different psychology behind what motivates them to give. So keeping that in mind, it's important to understand that each type of major donor prospect requires a bit of a different approach when you're developing the strategy for making an ask of them. Having said that, and for the purposes of simplicity today, we're going to base our recommendations and discussion to you on the basis that we're really talking primarily about individuals as major donor prospects, just for the purposes of simplicity. And again, there are many common ingredients for success that are going to help you regardless of whether it's an individual or a corporation or a foundation that you're talking about. We will cover some of the key ingredients for success. And with respect to that, it should come as no surprise to you that preparation is key. So we'll go through some of those key preparatory steps. We'll talk with you a little bit about the importance of getting a meeting with a prospective major donor and asking that particular individual for a conversation. We do find that often one of the biggest challenges that fundraisers have is getting from having a name on a page or a piece of paper or a list and getting to have a conversation with them face-to-face. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about some of the strategies that are employed in doing that. Further, we'll provide you with some key questions that you can ask prospective donors that will help inform the strategy that you use to move forward in making an ask. We'll talk a little bit about what happens in the ask and how you can be effective in making sure that the ask happens, including certainly closing the meeting and following up. And again, we will provide some time at the end for you to ask some questions. The first thing we'd like to do is to get to know a little bit more about you, and I'm going to ask Marina to set the poll. We'd like to understand a little bit about the audience that we're addressing today. So if you could kindly answer these two key questions for us, it would really help us calibrate the content for the balance of our discussion. We'd like to know a bit about your role in major gift fundraising and your experience with major gift fundraising.
That's great. Thanks, Anne. So we're starting out with the what is your role in major gift fundraising? And you can go ahead and just choose the option on the screen that best relates to your situation and go ahead and click directly on that. And I'm just watching as we're getting most people voting here. It's looking like we've got the majority of people on the call today, less than 50% of my job is related to major gifts fundraising. Great. Okay, so I'm just going to share these results so that everyone can see. We've got 11% primary role, 13%, more than 50% of my job is related to major gifts, 44%, less than 50%, 14% supporting major gifts, and 17% are volunteers. So welcome to all the volunteers on the call today. I'm just going to go ahead and launch the second poll here so we can get a sense of how many years of experience people have. So again, please just go ahead and vote on your screen. So we have less than 1 year, 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, more than 10 years. Great, thanks everybody. So it looks like we've got 40% less than 1 year, 24% 1 to 3 years, 14% 3 to 5 years, and 12% 5 to 10 years, with 10% having more than 10 years experience. So that's great. So Anne, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much for that. It's a tremendous help. And I, too, am very delighted to see such a great presence of people who are volunteers in the major gift arena on the call with us today. I'd like to take a moment to talk with you a bit about the characteristics of major gifts. Major gifts are, in short form, really, major gifts are some of the most high-touch relationship-based donor relationships and prospect relationships that you will maintain on behalf of your organization. Many of them are based on a relationship that the organization has or directly to the entity, to the individual, either as a past donor or past volunteer, past friend, so on and so forth, relationship based with an individual who works with the organization or relationship with a volunteer or board member. Often major gifts are characterized by face-to-face solicitation, and we'll talk a little bit about why that is. Major gifts are often given as a gift in order to focus on meeting the specific need or opportunity that an organization has. They're very rarely given by donors as unrestricted gifts, primarily because the value of the major gift to the donor implies that they are interested in moving you above and beyond your normal operations. And so they generally tend to be directed in support of a particular program or a particular initiative or particular building, like a scholarship fund and so on. It's important, I do want to say at this point, to understand the relativity concept, as I call it, about major gifts. And what I mean by that is that you have to understand that a major gift to your organization isn't necessarily a major gift from a donor's perspective. So, for example, RBC gives about $100 million away annually, and if they have made a contribution to you of $10,000 for a particular program, that to you is a major gift by your definition. But in order of magnitude, a $10,000 gift to RBC is not necessarily a major gift. Perhaps a $10 million gift is a major gift. And it's really important when you're moving into the milieu of major gifts to understand that what its value to you as a major gift may be a very different vantage point for the donor. So if you have a donor, for illustrations purposes, that has been an annual fund donor for you for many, many years, and they've supported you regularly and religiously, and they've gotten to the point where there's a program or an initiative that really has captured their attention and they want to do something significant, they may make a $5,000 gift to your organization, and that may be the biggest gift that they have ever given. To them, it's a major gift. To you, it may not be. But it's always very important to keep in mind that there may be a difference in major gift definition between you and your donor. If they're giving a major gift in their eyes, their hope and expectation is that you will treat them as a major gift donor. So it's important to keep that in mind. Relationship-based, by relationship-based, one of the additional things that I mean is that the relationship is generally a bilateral one. So, for instance, the supporters of a large charity like the Canadian Cancer Society, for instance, a supporter of their direct mail program receives one-to-many style communications, and they respond to that ask in a very transactional way. Major gift donors often have a very much closer relationship to your organization and perhaps a greater depth of understanding of what it is that you do. And so the nature of the type of relationship is much more bilateral or kind of two-way communication. It's more high touch. Major gift asks usually involve, in one way, shape, or form, peers, peer-to-peer fundraising, as influencers and solicitors. And that, again, as professional fundraisers, is really important to keep in mind. If you're asking a major gift of someone who certainly perceives it as a major gift, it's really valuable to incorporate in the process of making the ask someone else, maybe beyond yourself, who would be a respected influencer for that particular major gift donor. The gift itself is often reflective of the donor's interests. So if they're interested in youth-serving organizations, then perhaps the ask that you make of them is focused in that particular area. If they're interested in cancer-related causes, perhaps the nature of your ask is in that area. So it very much tries to align the needs and opportunities of the organization with what the donor really is very much interested in. And occasionally major gifts are pledged over a period of time, for instance, a multi-year pledge commitment, and that is very often seen, pardon me, in the context of capital campaigns or comprehensive campaigns, where donors really are asked to stretch to make a major gift, and they often want to take advantage perhaps of a multi-year period of time in which to fulfill their pledge. Major donor prospects often have, these are the characteristics of major donor prospects. Major donor prospects, or those that are the best, have the best potential to constitute your major gift list, often have very strong linkages to your organization already. And in order to find those, sometimes it's best to look within before you look outside. If you look to your list of past donors, particularly those that have been loyal supporters to your annual fund, current and past volunteers or board members, families who've been impacted by the charity, then you're very often going to find in that haystack somewhere a few very valuable needles that would be great donor prospects for major gifts. We chuckle, Carolyn and I, frequently because here in Canada we often work with organizations that if they're just starting the major gift work, everyone has the founder of Tim Hortons on their prospect list. And they say that they're there, that Mr. Joyce is there perhaps because he has the ability to make a big gift. But what they sometimes fail to understand is that he's on everybody's list. And so he doesn't necessarily have a close tie or linkage or pre-demonstrated interest or support to your organization. And those really, by and large, the best major donor prospects are the ones that have already exhibited a loyalty to you or exhibited a loyalty to the cause that your organization represents. Donors' interest in your organization can frequently be found because they've expressed it through volunteerism and support and attendance of some of the events that you've put on and providing financial support to your other appeals. Capacity is very important to understand as you're identifying prospective donors. It's important to identify donors that have the ability to give a major gift, and there are lots of influencers that can give you an indication of perhaps what their capacity might be. Sometimes stage of life can be as important as stage of finances. Particularly with individuals, occasionally it's difficult to determine what the real financial capacity is, but logic would tell us that there are certain sort of socio-demographic indicators that would give you an idea of whether somebody is at the stage of mind, stage of finances, and stage of life to be a good donor prospect. For instance, we have a client whose board chairman is in a very senior position, and he earns a significant six-figure income. But he also has more than 4 children currently pursuing post-secondary education, and his wife has just gone back to school. And so while he's on the surface of things a great major gift prospect because of his commitment and linkage to the organization, the timing may not be right to be asking him for a major gift now. But that doesn't mean that they can't approach him later on. On the converse side, one of our region's leading financial titans makes donations regularly of 8 figures, and but he does so to really only one charity of significance, and it is a university that he's very closely tied to. His history of philanthropy doesn't really make him a top major gift prospect for a lot of other organizations, although he certainly has the capacity, and he's demonstrated his interest in philanthropy, and he's at the stage of life where quite possibly he would be a great prospect. Demonstrated interest in your causes are really important indices. And also, you need to have an idea as to whether they're open to giving. They may be open to making a gift today, or they might be motivated by virtue of your work with them on sharing your story. But that motivation needs to be there in order for them to really be a legitimate prospect for a major gift donor. At this point, I think I'm going to ask Marina. I will pause, and I will ask Marina if she would like to facilitate any questions that you might currently have about the characteristics of major donors and the characteristics of major donor prospects.
I think we're good, and I know that there have been some questions coming in, but I think it's related to material you're going to cover, so we'll just hang on to those for now.
Oh, okay, fair enough. That's great. So we will move on and talk a little bit about the ingredients for success, which of course are always around preparation. At least 80% of the work that you will do in moving ahead with a major gift prospect will happen before you actually make the request. And one of the things that we find very, very valuable is to encourage fundraisers and fundraising volunteers to ask themselves some very key questions before they move too far down the road in making a major gift ask. What specifically is it that your organization needs, and why is it important? What type of an impact is it going to have? Are you thinking about something that really has minimal impact on your ability to reach and serve the populations or the communities that you exist to serve? or is it something that really is somewhat transformative in terms of bringing you forward in a significant way in the short term? Is it a special project? Is it a special building? Is it a special scholarship fund? Is it a special program or a piece of equipment? You need to be really specific about what exactly it is that you need, and you have to understand what the financial implications are for that. You have to ask yourself, who are your best prospects and why would they support this? So put yourself in the donor's position for a moment and ask why they would be interested in this particular initiative. Ask yourself who you have in your orbit or in the arena of your organization that really genuinely could be influential helpers and advisors with this particular prospect. And ask yourself what you do know about the prospect, about what their interests are, their ability to give, and don't forget about the history with your cause. Often we'll look externally to find information about a prospective major donor and leave until the very last part of our research the very important work of looking through our own records and our own files to try to find out if they've attended our events or supported our annual fund in the past, or if they've had a family member or a close ally who's been related to our organization. Those are really important things to understand in preparing to make a major gift ask. We actually recommend that you make a list and start assembling everything that you know about a prospective major donor before you go too far down the road. And part of that process can be speculating on what the upside of their giving potential might be to you based on their linkage to your organization, their ability to give, and their interest in either your cause directly or like causes as they have expressed those interests through gifts to maybe even like organizations. We also encourage organizations to enlist help and advice from volunteers and from friends and from board and staff members who can be of assistance in making that ask. You don't have to go it alone as a professional fundraiser or even as a leading volunteer. There are lots of folks within your organization that can help you. We have an organization here in Toronto that we've been working with for many, many years that runs a program here, and one of this region's leading philanthropists has been very supportive of that organization, and the folks that he wants to deal with are the frontline program personnel. He doesn't want to deal with the senior executives, he doesn't want to deal with the fundraising professionals, or even for that matter the board members. He wants to deal with the people who are delivering the programs, and if they need something, then he's the person that they will pick up the phone and call. So don't underestimate the value of having frontline personnel and other really important advocates and champions within your organization assisting you on some of those asks and in managing some of those relationships. You know, one of our favorite techniques is, you know, if you're using volunteers that are on your board or elsewhere in your organization who are nervous about making a major gift ask, but they know the prospective donor, ask them to open the door for you to help you get a meeting to bring in your CEO or yourself or another board member, or even ask them to go on a discovery call with you, which we'll talk about a little further in a moment or two. Sometimes volunteers are nervous about being the person who's actually making the ask, but they're more than happy to help you with the relationship side of getting things going with a major gift prospect, and they shouldn't be overlooked. It's important to do your homework. There are lots of online resources that are available to help you know as much as you can about a prospective donor before you set about making the ask. Don't give yourself short shrift on investing 80% of your time and effort in that really important preparation work. The key to success in major gifts are dependent upon the right person making the right ask for the right amount at the right time for the right project. And here at Bloom, we're very much in preparation for that, we're very much proponents of what we call a two-step system, a pre-ask conversation followed by the ask. And I want to just make a point here about the pre-ask conversation. We see and have been ourselves in a situation over the years where you've done all the important work and the research and you've identified as much knowledge and information as you possibly can about that prospective donor, and yet they remain on your prospect list or on the notepad next to your telephone, and you're really stuck trying to move them from being a name on a page to being an active participant in a conversation that's leading possibly to a major gift. If they're getting stuck on paper and you can't figure out a way forward, then we've got some suggestions that you might be able to employ to help move you forward in making major gift asks. The pre-ask conversation. So one of the most important things to remember about major gifts is that you should never be formalizing your request or finalizing your request for a major gift absent the important information that you're going to need directly from the prospective donor in order to put forward a request that they're really excited about and they're very interested in. And our strong recommendation to many professional fundraisers is that the first step ought to be to ask for a conversation. We call this the pre-ask conversation, and it's really critical to remember this is not the ask. This is a warm-up visit that will give you the opportunity to learn important information about what interests the prospect to help you calibrate a request that has a really good chance of being successful. And if you're unsure about how to get in the door to have a conversation, here are some suggested approaches. You can ask for a meeting to thank someone who has been a donor, and maybe they've reached a giving milestone. They have cumulatively given a certain amount of money over a certain period of time, or they've been a faithful donor to you for 5 or 10 years. You can ask for a brief meeting to thank them and be upfront about the fact that that really is your only agenda, that you're not coming to ask for something else. You can ask for a meeting to seek some advice and feedback on different elements of your fundraising case that you know might be of interest. So if you're running a program that supports, again, I'll default to youth, then you can ask for a meeting to seek the advice of the prospective donor in that area if you know it's an area that they might be interested in. You can ask them, if they've been a past donor to you, to be featured, for instance, in a magazine or a publication that you would like to highlight them as a donor to your organization, and you'd like to have an opportunity to sit down and interview them. One of our favorite stories is a story that came from a capital campaign here where we were working with a client who ultimately was very, very successful. And a Toronto-based philanthropist had made a $250,000 contribution to the campaign. It happened by way of a mutual friend who was a volunteer with the campaign. And the university president traveled to Toronto to invite her out for a cup of coffee and sit down and thank her personally. And that was really the only agenda. So she did so, and they had great chemistry. And in the course of the conversation, the university president said, you know, the thing that keeps me up at night is trying to find a lead gift donor for this project. And it was very clear that the individual was very interested in the project. And they came back to them within 48 hours and said, I'd be prepared to step up and be the lead donor for your initiative. And they subsequently ended up giving a very significant 7-figure gift. So sometimes just having the opportunity to sit down and share your passion and the story, you know, can lead to gifts when you've not even sometimes overtly asked for them. There are a lot of ways to secure a conversation with a prospective donor, and I think that a couple of the keys are really about making sure you're focusing on learning more about and from that prospective donor. If they have been a past supporter of your organization, you really should have no hesitancy in reaching out. If they've supported you in the past, they'll certainly be prepared to entertain your communication, either alone or if you've got someone who's assisting you with that. If their giving interests fit your profile, but you've not had any support from them in the past, perhaps you can try to find somebody who could be a great third-party intermediary who could open the door for you on that basis and give you an opportunity just to go and talk about the programs. It's really, really important when you're having a pre-ask conversation to be upfront and very clear that you're not coming to ask them for any support. And here's some great expressions that you can incorporate into that request that will help you make that point, that you're coming to learn more, that you're coming to ask advice, that you're coming to share an update, that you're coming to hear more about, or that you're coming to thank someone in person. You know, you can say, I'd like to have an opportunity to sit down and learn more from you about a particular program that you supported in another area in our community. But it's very, very important for you to be quite clear about the fact that you're not coming to request anything. You know, people who particularly have been long-standing allies of your organization want to be thought of as being insiders. And one of the organizations that we've worked with recently had a bit of a public relations crisis that was percolating in the media. And they contacted a long-standing major donor and said to them, look, you know, you've been a great supporter of our organization and an ally for a very long time. We've got some major news that's happening. It's breaking in the media tomorrow, and I wanted to have an opportunity to come and brief you on it beforehand and personally. And that gesture was so tremendously well received that what otherwise could have been a sticky wicket ended up being an important first step in moving toward another major gift ask of that individual donor. When you do have an opportunity to have a pre-ask conversation, here are some great conversation starters. You know, it's sometimes important to spend more time listening than talking in those conversations. And here are some great questions that we have found over the course of time have been tremendous in engaging a bilateral conversation with a prospective major donor and also giving you the fuel that you will then subsequently need to help put forward a really strong major gift request. And these types of questions are, what kind of impact do you want to have in the world or in the country or in our community with your social investments? It's a great way to learn about their giving priorities. What do you know about us? And I always find that to be one of the most fascinating questions because you do learn a lot about a donor's relative awareness or lack of awareness for the work that your organization does. And also it gives you an opportunity to either reinforce or debunk opinions. So if that question leads you to a place where you're hearing things that are not necessarily accurate, then it does give you a platform upon which you can have a conversation to perhaps set records straight. How is your organization doing in advancing, how is our organization doing in advancing its mission in your view? And you will find out about their opinion of the value that you have as a charity in impacting the community or the world, as well as the relative importance that they place on the work that you do. What aspects of our plan appeal to you the most? And this is always a very revealing question because often donors will give you very direct feedback about what aspect of your work they find most interesting. And that should be a clue to you as to what they might be interested in funding with a major gift. How can we keep you informed of or involved in the life and work of our organization after this discussion? And that too is a really important question to ask. It tells the person that you really you do care about managing the relationship in a way that works well for them. It'll give you an opportunity to customize the way that you communicate with them after the fact. If they say, don't call me, I'm better reached by email, or you know, don't invite me to specific events, but I'd like to be included in these, then it allows you to tailor your moves management or donor cultivation strategy in those ways, and you're getting it directly from the person that you're trying to reach. The important end objective of these conversations is to learn about the donor and to make sure you have an opportunity to thank them for their time and their input, and also to set the stage for the ask. If you have secured an audience with a prospective major donor, chances are you are in the company of a willing participant in a two-way exchange of information, so you really shouldn't be nervous about it. Don't be afraid to open the door to discussing even sometimes challenging topics that can be in the media around issues that your organization may be involved in or about the organization itself. It's always better to know about those hidden issues so that you can address them face-to-face with your prospective donor and not have them be hiding like mines in a minefield for you later on. Here's an example of how you can close a pre-ask conversation. Mrs. Green, we've so enjoyed and benefited from this conversation. I'd like to follow up with you about that project that you seem so interested in and maybe put forward a request for support for you to consider. How and when would you prefer we do that? If you've got an indication from a prospective major donor as to how and when they would be prepared to entertain a request for funding, then you are well on your way to being successful in that request. And then obviously it's time to start thinking about the ask, and we call that showtime. Before you book the meeting, you should be spending some time determining who should be involved in that meeting. Should your meeting with that individual include the donor's spouse, family members, others, key advisors? Sometimes organizations make a mistake by not including members of the family when asking for an individual gift. They sometimes assume that it's either one spouse or the other that is the go-to person for family philanthropy. But it's important to be careful about the message that that sends to those that you might be excluding from the conversation. You should take some time beforehand as well to anticipate some of the questions that you might face. You've had a pre-ask conversation, you've done your homework, sit down and take the time and make a list of some of the questions or objections that you think may come up, and be prepared to be proactive about addressing them in the conversation. If you're bringing someone else along, a member of your staff, program staff, volunteer, board member, make sure they're really well trained and very comfortable going in. They don't necessarily have to be the one that puts forward the specifics of the ask, but do a dry run with them in advance so that you don't have those awkward moments where one is looking at the other and you're not entirely sure who's supposed to say what. Have a practice run. By the time the meeting happens, you've done the vast majority of the heavy lifting. We do recommend that wherever possible that your ask for a major gift be done in person, and preferably with a soliciting team of 2 people. More than 2 sometimes seems like you're ganging up, less than 2, and sometimes you're reliant then on just the interpersonal dynamic between those 2 people. 2 is always a really great team to be sitting down and talking about a major gift on behalf of your organization. Prepare and bring a simple, cogent request that involves the specific amount, how you're going to spend it, the terms of what you're looking for, how you would recognize the gift, and the specific impact that it would have, and also an indication of how you would propose to be accountable back to that donor, perhaps, on how you spent their money. Make the case from the donor's vantage point. Show them that you understand what interests them and that you've listened carefully to the cues that have been given to you by them in through their previous acts of philanthropy to you and the conversations that you've had. Bring a summary written request along with any supporting materials to leave behind in that conversation. After the ask is verbalized, remain quiet and allow the prospect to respond. Please fight the urge to fill the dead air with chatter. They will respond at some point, and the pregnant pause can be very, very important in allowing them a chance to digest your request and give you a response. We were part of the soliciting team for a large request to a board member of an organization that we used to work with, and we did all the work, the preparation, brought the soliciting team. It included a representative of the board and the CEO of the organization, who really had some trepidation about making the ask, particularly the amount of money that was being asked for. And after doing an absolutely bang-up job of making the request and putting forward their strongest foot in making the pitch, immediately and without the delay, the prospective donor said, "Yes, absolutely, I will give you that amount of money." And they were so shocked that nobody really knew what to say. So there was a long moment of awkward silence in which nobody really realized that they had been successful because they had been expecting a much more challenging call. So it took a moment or two for people to muster themselves and actually come back to say thank you in very genuine terms. So after the ask is verbalized, try to listen very carefully to what the prospective donor's response is. Closing the meeting and following up is key. Make sure that you're prepared to discuss a deferred gift. If a prospective donor says to you, "Look, I'd really love to be able to help you. It's a great initiative. I'm just not in a position currently to fulfill the request that you've made financially," then make sure you're prepared to talk, if you can, about designing financial terms that will accommodate that donor's needs. Be specific about when and how you will follow up if they've not given you an answer. So often major donors will say, "Look, this has been great. very, very helpful. Leave it with me and let me speak to my colleagues or my family, or sleep on it and think about it a little bit more. Just make sure you leave that meeting knowing the specifics of when and how they would like you to follow up with them. If you need to have a second meeting because they are sending you away with a list of unanswered questions, try to schedule the next meeting at the conclusion of the first meeting so that it doesn't get lost in the shuffle of the prospective donor's busy calendar. And remember that no doesn't necessarily mean never. Sometimes a no means I'm not able to do it right now. Sometimes it means I'd be happy to help you, but not for this particular project or not this particular amount. So the extent to which you can find out what it is exactly that they're saying no to, the better off you'll be. Always close with a thank you and be genuine. You've been beneficiary of the gracious and generous contribution of that prospective donor's time. And it's important that you extend to them on behalf of the organization that you work with how grateful you are for that. Regardless of the outcome of your ask, don't drop that prospect from your cultivation radar. Remember, at this point, even if they have not said yes, which I think they probably have, you've had the benefit of a couple of discussions with them that have deepened the relationship that you have with them and that have been really important steps in cultivation. Keep records of the interactions that you have had and the important details around that major gift cultivation and asking strategy. And please remember that on average, from beginning to end, it normally takes someplace between 18 and 24 months to secure a major gift commitment from someone that you've just identified as a major gift prospect. So just because they don't respond to your request today does not mean that they're not an important future prospect. Who knows when those little chicks that are going to hatch down the road. So now with 15 minutes left to go, I think I'd like to ask Marina to moderate your questions.
Wonderful. That's great. We've got lots of questions coming in, so I'm going to try to group these as coherently as possible. Let's go back to making the ask. How important is it to have the ED or the CEO specifically involved?
That is a great question and one that comes up an awful lot. You know, I'm a firm believer that bringing somebody whose office with your organization, their title, is very senior, sends a very strong signal to that prospective donor of how important it is to you. And I think that there's still, in this day and age, there's an important dynamic that happens when you've got the ability as a major gift donor to see the whites of the eyes of the person who runs your organization and be able to ask really in-depth questions of that person. So I do believe that the role of many CEOs and executive directors in charitable organizations needs to include some time to go on major gift calls. Just make sure if you're the fundraiser that you're preparing them with the same degree of thoroughness in advance of a call as you would if they were a volunteer. I do believe it's important to be able to bring senior people in on your major gift asks.
Great. And how many times in a given year would you suggest that you could go back to a donor with different asks?
Well, the general rule of thumb is that communicating with a major donor really should happen about 7 times a year. But I would caution you that 7 being the average, but I would caution you that those 7 communications should not all be asks. And I think you've got to be careful about over-asking, because one of the most common complaints sometimes from major donors is that the only time I ever hear from that particular organization is when they need something. So you have to balance informing them, engaging them, communicating with them, and asking them. So, you know, you kind of have to be the judge if you've made an ask and it has been declined as to what's a good time to go back. You know, I wouldn't go back right away with the same request, but if you come back with something that's monumentally different, then perhaps you can go back another time during the course of the same year.
Great. And if we sort of go backwards in the process, right to the beginning when we're talking about research, Rebecca has asked, you mentioned research. That whole area baffles me. What am I looking for and where would I find it? And I think we have a few questions that are along those lines. So perhaps you could speak to the prospect research part.
I would be happy to, but I'd be even happier if my esteemed colleague Carolyn hopped in, because she is our guru of all things prospect research. Carolyn, would you like to address that question, or would you prefer it if I did?
You know, I knew you were going to say that. I just put my phone off of mute. I know Anne's going to ask me to address this. I will try to do it in as succinct a way as possible, but in the prospect research world, what you're really looking for is evidence of linkage, ability, and interest. So linkages are linkages to your organization. So you're looking for a way to tie the prospective donor to your organization, either through past interest in your organization as a volunteer, as a board member, as a donor, or a close connection to one of those individuals in your organization, a volunteer, a board member, a staff member. So you want to find some connection in the way that you are actually linked to this prospective donor. You're looking obviously for ability, which is also called capacity. So if you are looking for a gift of, say, a six-figure gift of $100,000 or more, the prospective donor needs to have the ability to make that gift without it being their last penny, obviously. And the way that you can look for some of, if you don't know that it's a known philanthropist in the community, one of the ways, there's many ways that you can identify capacity in a prospective donor by looking at their stock holdings, looking at their real estate holdings. There's a whole sort of science behind that, and it's much too in-depth for me to explain it all today, where you would find that information. The other aspect is interest. So interest in your organization or in the particular project that you would like this individual to fund. Often we look at philanthropists' past giving. What other organizations have they supported? So, for example, if you happen to be an organization that deals, as Anne mentioned earlier, with youth or youth at risk, if you are looking at a prospective donor who has clearly only shown interest in supporting the arts, they are probably not the best prospect for you to approach for a major gift. There are probably other prospects that are more closely linked or more interested in your in the work that you're doing. So we often look at a prospective donor's history, both with your organization and also with others. Who have they supported? Why did they support them? Sometimes it's about who has made the ask to them. Sometimes it's because they have a close connection to the cause. How much did they give? And how much did they give relative to other philanthropic gifts that they've made? So if they've made a $50,000 gift to an organization that serves youth at risk, and they've made several $million-dollar gifts to arts organizations, their passion probably lies with the arts organizations. And you can finish up anything that I know in that very brief.
I think you've covered it very well. Carolyn has honed this to a fine art, and she's referred to in our shop as thesis, because really there's not an awful lot that happens that she can't find out about. But it's also a it's also a skill that she's honed over many years. I think the key is to use your instinct to try to find precedent-setting information. So if you can't look within your organization's database or records or files, or even sleuth it out with the people around you to find out about what that person is interested in, then you can look externally, frankly look externally anyway, to find out if they've exhibited a type of what their preferences are, what their biases are, what they're really interested in. There's a bit of a psychosocial part of it too. I do always recommend to organizations, particularly those that are relatively new to the major gift realm, that once you as a professional have done your work and you've culled your best shot list of 5 or 10 major gift prospects, take that list and what you know around to some confidential advisory sessions with some of your colleagues within the organization and at the board, and see if they can tell you more about those people than you already know. So sometimes firsthand information based on what folks know is really, really helpful as well. But externally, look for the precedents in behavior, in giving, in interest. that you think will give you an indication of what it is that they really like.
And Anne and Carolyn, what's the best way to find out who donors may have given to you in the past? Is that primarily just monitoring the media and doing that type of research, or is there another tool that you can suggest?
There are lots of tools. I'll touch on one or two. Carolyn can certainly backfill, but most organizations are very public now about who their supporters are. They may not be specific in terms of gift amounts, but they often will recognize their donors in public ways. Online is very common now, and in their annual reports. And so, as tedious as it sounds, sometimes some creative Google searching can yield you the appearance of a donor's name on a donor report for another organization. So that's one way to go, and also going through the annual reports of organizations that are also in the fundraising arena in your community, perhaps, is a way to go. Carolyn?
There are paid databases that you can subscribe to that will give you the giving history often of public companies and foundations. There are very few resources out there other than, good old-fashioned sleuthing that will give you the information about individual donors. They're not required to report that, or they are not required to report it on their tax forms. So in Canada and the United States, foundations have to report who they grant money to, so that kind of information is easy to find. But individuals don't have to say publicly who they have given money to, made donations to, so that actually requires some sleuthing and having somebody on your team who pays attention to the media, who does things like surreptitiously takes pictures of donor walls when they're out at events. Not that I do that, but sometimes I do. So you really do have to be a gatherer of that sort of information as far as individuals go, and do some creative Googling and listen to. Sometimes it's really good to get that group of people around the table, your volunteers, and they will tell you, hey, Joe gave $500,000 to such and such, and he doesn't want anybody to know about it. That's the end of my.
That's a great answer.
Thank you.
Marina, do you have another?
I do. So if we now turn our attention within our organization, do you have tips for staff who want to encourage their board to give, or at least open the door for a major gift conversation with a member of their board?
That is a really critical part of leadership. So, any board that is responsible for governing a charitable organization has part of its mandate the fiduciary responsibility for the fiscal health of the organization. The challenge comes when it means that you don't actually ask a board member to make a charitable contribution when you enlist them to the board. So what we always find is that lack of clarity of expectations of board members when they're enlisted to serve on the board often results in fundraisers' very real frustration by looking year in and year out and saying to themselves, our board is not giving, or they're certainly under-giving relative to their capacity. So, the first recommendation that I would have, whether it is or isn't something you can affect change on in the short term, is to think carefully about working toward specific job descriptions for enlisting new board members that are validated by your nominating committee of the board, where it's made very clear to each new board member that they're going to be asked to make a contribution to the charitable organization. If you're lucky enough to have a board member who's got the capacity to make a major gift, then you do really need to treat them with the same rigor in terms of preparing to make the ask as you would an outside major gift prospect. From my perspective, if you have a major gift prospect that's a board member and a major gift prospect that's not a board member, the first one that I would ask would be your board member. They should be very familiar with the needs and aspirations of your organization, and hopefully they would be an easier ask for you to move ahead with in the short term than someone outside. If you have a board member that has made a major gift, you have just de facto automatically created a great advocate and champion to help you go externally and ask for other major gifts. The peer-to-peer dynamic is really, really important, and if you have a board member who has made their own major gift, they have the ability to say, along with you, to another major gift prospect, I too have, examined my own philanthropy, and this is the process that I went through in realizing why this cause was important enough and worthy of my support. And that type of empathetic approach can be very, very helpful in a major gift call.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Anne. Now, if we move on to the pre-ask, and I think this is a question that also came up from a couple of different people. When you're in the pre-ask, doesn't the donor know that you're coming back to make an ask? And is this a bit of an elephant in the room, so to speak?
Oh, well, not necessarily. I mean, it depends on how you manage the conversation. People who are in the major gift world really do kind of need to know how to read the audience, read their room, as it were. And if you're in that pre-ask conversation and the walls are being put up right away, then you kind of have to guide yourself accordingly. You've committed to going in and not making an ask at that meeting, and you have to respect that commitment. If you've said to somebody, I want to come and sit down and talk to you about a project and seek your input on it, but I'm not going to ask you, I'd like to meet with you Tuesday, but I'm not going to ask you to support it. But if they've been enthusiastic and they've got great comments to make and they're really open to it, then you'd be crazy to leave that meeting and not say, look, would you be prepared to entertain a request for this? You've not made an ask, but you've asked if you can make an ask, if you understand the distinction.
Great. And if we move on to recognition, is it generally accepted to ask the donor how they would like to receive recognition? And what do you do if a donor prefers to be anonymous?
The second part of your question is a hands-down easy one to answer, and that is if they've said that they'd like to be anonymous, you 100% have to respect that. 100%. There's nothing to be gained on anyone's behalf if you don't respect that. So if they want to be anonymous, you need to make them anonymous. I always, especially for major gifts, I always like to have prepared some ideas for how we would recognize a gift before you go in and make the ask. And I'm always cognizant that you shouldn't lead the conversation with how you're going to recognize the donor, because what that then says to the donor is that we think that the most important thing to you is recognition. It should be at the tail end of the conversation. It should be an after the fact. It should be a spin-off of the agreement that you have around the importance of the program or the importance of the new facility that's being constructed or whatever the initiative is. So at the end of the conversation, you should be prepared to say, look, it's really important to us. It sets such a great example for our other donors. It's such a great housekeeping seal of approval for this project. We would really like to have the honor of recognizing you, and here are some of the things that we've thought of. So I don't particularly like to ask the open-ended question for a major gift ask to say to a donor, just tell us how you'd like to be recognized and we'll make that so. It kind of implies a little laziness on my part as the soliciting professional. I like to go in with a couple of ideas and then use that as a forum to seek some feedback on those ideas.
Great. And I think we'll just take one more question before we wrap up. With regards to asking for the gift, do you suggest an amount to the donor? And if so, how do you determine what amount to ask for?
Each is a very situation specific, but by the time you get to closing, if you will, request, you should be suggesting a specific amount. There's no question about it. Hopefully by that time, everybody is in agreement about the importance of the project and the importance of that donor's role in it, and the finer details really are about the financials. Most major gift asks should include a specific ask amount. But again, that shouldn't be the opening salvo in your conversation. It should be one of the later ones. And you cannot, you should not, you can't, but you should not assign an ask amount for an initiative that exceeds the cost of that initiative. remember, again, you have an obligation as a fundraiser and as a charitable organization to be accountable to that donor for how you spent the money. So if your capital campaign is $25 million and you want that donor to contribute $500,000, then you've got to be transparent about the bigger picture and the smaller picture on the financial side. If you're asking them to do something specific, like fund a program, a new program that's going to cost $40,000 a year for each of the next 3 years, then you should be asking them for $40,000 a year for each of the next 3 years, not more than that.
Great. Well, I think we're running just a bit over time, so we're going to end the Q&A there. I want to thank you again, Anne and Carolyn, for a wonderful presentation. Just for those of you that were asking, the Q&A at the end will be included in your recording that you'll receive tomorrow. Just before we sign off, I want to remind you all that you will get that email with the recording and the presentation slides, as well as the CFRE form if you're intending to use today's session towards your educational requirements tomorrow morning. So watch for that in your inbox. We're also going to include a link to a very short survey. If you can take 5 minutes to fill it out, it would be really helpful for us. You'll have an opportunity there also to let us know if there's future topics you'd like to see covered in upcoming sessions. On that note, our next webinar is coming up on January 28th, and yes, that is 2016, if you can believe it. We will be welcoming Mark Bloomberg, who is a charity lawyer, and he's going to be discussing the top 20 compliance issues for registered charities in Canada. And there will be a link to register for that session in the email that you receive tomorrow if you're interested. I want to thank you all again for joining us today and for all of your questions, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marina.
Thank you.
Take care. Goodbye, everyone.